Yeshurun asked, how does the honey recognize the flower as a flower? Is it the color, the scent, and so forth? Well, bees come out with some predisposition, some innate predisposition to search things that look in color or smell like flowers. But most of what affects what flowers will go to is their experience and learning. So a bee first comes and sees something that's colorful and has a scent, sweet scent, and she will explore it. If she finds a reward, which is usually either a nectar, which is sweet, or pollen, which they collect as a protein source, then she will learn that this is a good source and she will come back to it. If it does not give it any reward, she will quickly ignore it and look for something else. And in fact, when scientists tried to find what is the naive preference of a bee, and they allowed her to choose between different colored targets, they found that the bee did not land on any of them until they added scent or odor to the target, and then the bee landed, and on some colors more than others. But again, learning was much more strong in affecting their choice. Those that get rewarded, they learn to go to very quickly. And that's why we put so much emphasis on bee learning and decision making. And we found that actually, interestingly, recently, we have an invasion of one of the Asian species of honeybees, the dwarf honeybee, that arrived to the southern ports of Israel in Eilat and port of Aqaba in Jordan some 3 years ago. And we find them going to sweet things around the hotels. They've learned very quickly to recognize sweet popsicles, sweet drinks at the bar, and they're all over the bars and popsicles and trash cans. So they can learn very quickly to associate something that's sweet and rewarding with that reward and collect from it. So one question that many of you asked and is really much in the news and is a big problem is honeybee losses. Lily and Yoav asked, how immediate is this danger of losses to the production of agricultural crops? And are there any known effects today? So what we find, if we look historically over the last 40, 50 years, is that there's been a large decline in bee populations. For example, in the US, since the 1940s till today, there's about 60% fewer bee colonies, managed honeybee colonies, for a variety of reasons, different pests, pesticides, and different practices. And despite that, the demand for bees is actually growing worldwide. This is true all over the world, but especially in developing countries, where large areas of, say, where they would grow rice or wheat or corn that does not require pollination are transformed into more intensive and more economically productive crops, fruits and vegetables that do require pollination. And so there's a decline in the number of bee colonies worldwide, while there's increase in the demand for pollination. And so we predict that soon these lines are going to cross where there will not be enough bee for pollination to meet the demand. And there's a few crops already today that we see that. For example, the almond industry in western US, which is a huge industry, it needs about 1 million colonies to be transported from all over the US to the western coast during the almond blooming time. And with the decline of bee populations in the US, there's been a shortage in colonies and therefore an increase in the rental price. So if before, some 30 years ago, an almond grower would pay $10 per hive for the pollination services it provided, today the price is more like $50. And Nitai asks, on top of that, is there a difference in bee losses suffered by different subspecies of bees? Because I mentioned before that there's many different subspecies of the Western or European honeybee. So we don't see clear differences, but we do see that most of the losses are suffered in the northern hemisphere. So the US and Europe, and also in Israel we're seeing problems, and less so in Africa or in Australia. And what seems to be the main correlation between the two is the existence of a very mighty mite. It's a big pest on bees, which is called the varroa mite. It's a kind of tick mite that sticks onto bees. It's small, about 1 millimeter size, and it sucks the hemolymph or blood of the bees, and it also transfers viruses as it goes from one bee to the other, from one colony to the other. And this is a mite that came from Asia to Israel in the 80s, also to the US, and it is also now considered to be probably the #1 factor causing bee declines in areas where it exists. It's a complicated issue because it's not that the mite itself causes all the collapses, but it's being there, plus the viruses it moves around, vectors and so forth, probably is thought today to be the main problem contributing to bee losses. So Yoav and Paul also asked, in fact, what are the causes of bee losses, as I mentioned now, and are there alternatives to pollination by bees? And so I mentioned that when there were first colony losses some 3-4 years ago in the US, there were many hypotheses brought up as possible problems. Many of them seem to probably not be that strong, like cellular phones or UFOs and all kind of stories like that. But it seems to be that the stress that the bees suffer today from pesticides, movement, and probably mostly the varroa mite is contributing to these losses. What can we do with the decline of bees? So there's two problems. One is the decline of the honeybees, the managed honeybees, that's, as I've mentioned, has been deteriorating over the last few decades. But also other bees, of the 25,000 other species, they're also declining, like a lot of biodiversity is being lost. And so what is, today there is a movement to try to both save the honeybee and use it more efficiently in pollination, but also to try to find ways to more efficiently use alternative pollinators or native bees. Not only bees, also other pollinators, but especially bees, to try to use many of the native bees that we have in Israel. We have about 1,000 native species that we know quite a little bit about, and there's a few efforts to try to save these bees and try to find ways to use them. And there are already a few species, not many, but that can be used in agriculture, where you can put nests to aggregate these bees, to try to increase the flower that they have available, to decrease the pesticides you use, to grow those populations, to have more alternative pollination. And of course, there's also the possibility of hand pollination. When there's no bees, you can pollinate by hand, flower by flower. Of course, it's very labor intensive and very expensive. Another possibility is to try to have crops that with reduced need of pollination. For example, in cucumbers, there are some varieties today that are parthenocarpic, that can, the flower can produce a fruit either by giving some plant hormone or other methods, but without requiring pollination. And then they can be grown in greenhouses or area without bees, and that can happen. Often that, though, affects the taste. So the small, tasty, good pickle cucumbers, those are pollinated by bees, while some of the larger varieties that tend to be less tasty are those that do not require pollination. And finally, Tanugi said that he loves bees, and he wants to be part of this department. The Triwaks Bee Research Center is part of the entomology department of the Faculty of Agriculture. We have both an undergraduate and a graduate program where you can come learn about bees and join us doing research to learn more about bee learning and bee biology. And I welcome you all to join us. And again, thank you for your questions and comments, and take care.